Yeah, so my name's Geoff Mulgan. I'm currently a professor at a university and a background in various things, including schools and government and civil society. And I guess I've always thought there was a bit of a problem that our education was individual, passive, siloed, non-creative. We probably all agree with that. And what I thought I'd do very briefly mention sort of 5 things, 30 seconds each, which might be part of what needs to happen. I thought I'd use a mobile phone as the little prompt for this thing which most children now have and they're sort of banned from the classroom. But I think the mobile phone can be a really useful tool for thinking about the things we need to think about. So first of all, I actually still believe we need depth of knowledge in education, depth of knowledge of the physics which lies behind these sort of things, but also depth of knowledge of the history. It was in fact telecommunications which paved the way for the United Nations and all global collaboration. The fact you can call from here to the other side of the world rests on all sorts of standards and governance which most people haven't a clue about. And of course you can also use your phone to get depth of knowledge of things like the history of art. And for me, the fascinating thing I think everyone should learn is how art taught us repeatedly how you combine consonance and dissonance, order and chaos in new ways. Maybe we might come back to that. Secondly, I think anyone now needs to know knowledge about knowledge. Now, some of that is kind of obvious, the way that Finland now teaches school kids how to spot fake news. We need to break out of our own echo chambers wherever we are and understand the nature of the knowledge we have. And anyone looking at the history of science realizes the vital importance of the arts and creativity in shaping how scientists saw things and thought that often new forms of observation, through microscopes and telescopes and X-rays, preceded the scientific discovery. So it's crazy to see these as separate domains. Thirdly, I would love to see an education which put more emphasis on wisdom. And there are obviously many aspects to this. There's learning how to have an ethical take on anything you do in your own life or your politics or so on. Again, there's seeing things in the round through multiple perspectives. So as I said, looking at a mobile phone through its economics, its sociology, its politics, its technology, and not just the TikTok you can use it for. These are useful tools. And above all, I think getting the habit of what I call learning loops, where we look at our own predictions of what we think might happen, notice what actually happens, and then learn from that. And the problem is even very clever, very progressive people tend to find confirming facts in the world. We're all very bad at challenging our own assumptions. And I think that is the key to true wisdom, is challenging our own deep beliefs. And then, as Csaba said, systems. We live in a world of systems. This is a total system, but so is our ecosystem, our biosphere. And so we have to learn fairly early on how to think systemically and how one thing influences another. And finally, this thing is a fantastic tool for doing stuff. I think we learn a lot about the world through practical projects in teams, which can start in primary school, certainly secondary school, even more universities, working together on things like improving air quality in your neighborhood, working on the SDGs, perhaps sorting out the fake news in your own community as COVID and anti-vaxxers go crazy. And this is the most powerful tool ever in history to mobilize people, to find allies, form coalitions, run campaigns, and so on. So this bit of machinery, which often we see as mindless and a problem, I think can be a route into all the ways our learning systems and our learning habits need to change to cope with the incredible problems we have up ahead. And of course, the last 10 months of COVID have forced us to be much more dependent on these things, but we need to perhaps recover their radical potential. I think this is the real challenge, is any kind of education has limited attention, limited time, limited resources. So you can't do everything. So how do you combine, as it were, the vertical knowledge and the horizontal putting the pieces together? Now, we are in a society, an economy which depends on an enormously complicated division of labor, which requires many people to have very, very deep knowledge. You can't understand an energy system or the choices, for energy systems in the next 20 or 30 years without very, very deep knowledge. Being superficial is no help to anyone. So to my mind, it is crucial that we do keep some of the role of education in building deep, and yes, it is disciplinary knowledge, whether it's biology or physics or chemistry or history or economics and so on, and then add on to it these horizontal capabilities of thinking, systemically thinking in interdisciplinary ways, understanding the interactions and dynamics. And the fear is if you just junk the sort of the disciplinary knowledge and try and get everyone straight away to think systems, you just get hot air and bullshit and no one has any impact on anything. I think that's a very practical challenge for secondary schools, for universities, and also for anyone who's trying to work on systems change. How do you get that balance right? Because in the long run, our time and our attention is still the scarce resource. We have infinite information, but sadly, pretty much the same absorptive capacity probably our forebears had 50 years ago, 200 years ago. I think in universities, where you start with real life problems, like how do we build maybe a circular economy in our city, and break that down into what does that mean for, let's say, fashion or building materials. And then you work backwards from that to pull in the knowledge from the different disciplines. And I think this is the key. Our knowledge of ecological disaster almost all comes from science, from incredible capacities through IPCC and others to project the dynamics of climate change. Our only plausible routes to solve it will involve all sorts of changes of mindset, but they'll involve also a lot of very deep knowledge about changing production systems and recycling systems and energy systems, which has to be grounded in depth of knowledge. So it's really important to avoid these false polarities. There's a lot of literature on education, especially perhaps in the US and parts of Europe, which just polarizes. It's either all knowledge and all sort of ramming kids' heads with knowledge. And the most popular books actually assert this still, that you can't have any skill without knowledge. And then a mirror view, which says that's all complete rubbish, and sort of dive into purely sort of competency-based approaches. The evidence suggests actually it is both and, not either or. I guess that's what I'm trying to drive at. So I like to see from really 11 or 12 onwards, every child at the core of the curriculum, not on the side, working on practical projects, which could be looking after a swampland, or it could be working out how to improve air quality in your neighborhood. And through that, bringing in the maths, the communication, the history, the physics, and so on. And then you get an interaction between, as it were, the verticals and the horizontals. But either or doesn't really work, because in a world of 8 billion people, we will need more expertise, not less. And the biggest problems we have of expertise is that the knowledge is not sufficiently reflective or thoughtful, or isn't oriented to understanding purposes and ends and ethics. It's not that we want to row back to a time when, my parents, their time education stopped at 14, 3% of the population went to universities. It's incredibly recent that education of any kind has become universal. So we've got to go forward, not backwards, in my view. The goal was the inspiration of the Open University, which is our biggest educational institution here in the UK. Just two comments which are both and thinking. The crucial fact of the Anthropocene is we live at the moment in the very best time ever in terms of health, education, security, prosperity, of all time, and yet also a time of incredible fragility. You've got to have both in mind at the same time. And similarly, our education has to be respectful of the depth of knowledge of physics, biology, but also sociology and other things which people have worked so hard on, but also from an early age, link those together, connect them to ethics, connect them to the bigger view. And we've got to fight against singular mono views, whether they appear progressive or reactionary.